Yesterday, he did not make his Monday press conference. He was on with Paul Feinbaum with his regular Monday little post-presser sit-down with Paul. And he was speaking with the media yesterday here locally after practice. And, he talked a little bit about the work week. We don't have the cuts. We can talk a little bit about what he talked over. And he was talking about the bye week. And he really referenced, look, there's more development that needs to take place. They are going to have the weekend off. They are going to have some sense of, able to get away from it. But for the most part, this is a pretty normal work week for LSU when you're talking about, installation, working on themselves, trying to really, bear down and find what the, gear up for SEC play. I mean, with Ole Miss coming in next week, obviously you got to be ready to play. And, Brian Kelly said that they're approaching it really in the sense of, it's not a week off. That they'll have the weekend off. They'll have time to get away from football. But, here in the week, this is something that, look, they are going and working on and paying attention to. So, I thought that was something that really jumped out. I thought he was a little bit, kind of called himself out. He was talking about he was mentioning something that he said in the press conference that he was maybe a little too emotional about. I think that was the Mason Taylor thing.
Yeah.
If I was, because he didn't say what it was.
Good at football, right? It was just that's what we were talking about. Whenever we saw it happen, like this is a little bizarre. Yeah. That he was like kind of going off the rails of things that we were like nobody. It was just he was scrambling after the Perkins injury.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have this cut from yesterday that I'm about to play because it's gives kind of a little bit of insight into his demeanor, how it's been this year because he's an open book because when you have a 10-year contract, you can do that.
Sure.
You seem to be a lot more relaxed, joking with us. Your post-game pressers have been a lot more, satirical, I guess. Just what is it in this season that's kind of enabled you, I guess, to maybe be a little bit more yourself?
Did you see me with Nussmeier on the sideline? That didn't look intense. No, I think I maintain my intensity, when it's game time. That's my office. Like if I had a camera in your office, I'm sure there'd be times where you get intense. I'm sure Wilson doesn't. I know that. But if you had a camera in your office, there's intense moments. But no, I just think that there's a lot of coaching, there's a lot of teaching going on. For me, you have to be able to get to a lot of guys and talk to a lot of guys at different levels. Nuss and I have got a great relationship where he responds well if he's leaned on in some instances. You can't lean on him like that all the time, but there are times when you need to lean on him,
I was more interested in the levity, the levity that you bring. It seems different than my recollection of you in the past, I guess. Do you feel like you've had a little bit of a rebirth here?
Oh, I love it. It's comfortable. I think I don't have to feel like you can't, joke around a little bit without being taken too serious. So for me, I have to check myself at times because I think a couple of weeks ago I was a little bit too sarcastic in the press room. So I have to check myself too. But by and large, it's I enjoy it here. I love being the head coach at LSU, and it's a place that for me it feels real comfortable.
That was a good one. In that watching it yesterday, I remember thinking, that was something that's a good answer. It was a lot what when he was talking about Nussmeier, we referenced that yesterday. Nussmeier being a coach's kid, and Brian Kelly kind of saying it there. He responds to that. He probably responds sometimes better to getting chewed out or getting jumped a little bit from the standpoint of getting in your face, and Nussmeier can handle that. He has proven. Obviously, you don't want to overdo that, but Nussmeier is a kid that, or I say, is a player that responds well to that. I mean, there's only a few people probably on every team that you can really do that to, whether it be publicly or privately. Sometimes people just shut down. Sometimes people just disengage. Sometimes people will start looking elsewhere now, right? In today's world where, I can be here tonight, I can be there tomorrow, where I can just hit the transfer portal and leave. It's got to be very calculated on how you use that. And, I said the same thing about Brian Kelly. I mean, when he got down here, it was surprising to me to see how relaxed he was and laid back of a personality. I had just, known Brian Kelly like all of you through my TV, through my social media, of watching him, destroy quarterbacks coming off the field. Looked like his head was going to explode because he was so red-faced walking up and down the sidelines. He had a reputation within the league of, not in the league, but within the sport of, there wasn't a lot of people that seemed to really
was not likable
like him, and his first couple of years here in Baton Rouge, one of the things that has been surprising to me, and like I said, I mean, it was the first thing I told him when I met him. I mean, one of the first questions I asked, I set it up by saying, you surprised me in the way that, you kind of wore shorts, T-shirts. I thought you were kind of a coat and tie guy. I thought you were more strict, serious, regimented. And, he makes kind of like a joke per press conference. Mm-hmm. That's about his average. Whether it's dry, whether it's, like Cobble said, like satirical, sometimes it's hard to pick up on, but, if you watch the presser twice, you're like, oh, he's probably making a joke there, which is a little, I think it took me back from his personality. I just didn't expect that. Right. And I think some of it probably goes into getting a 10-year, fully guaranteed $100 million contract. To me, I think that it'll be a great psychology case study in a couple of years to see as sports started to really hand these things out, whether it be to players, quarterbacks, max players in the NBA, college coaches now, what happened to the production, of some of these high performers, high achievers, when you just say, hey, look, here's the next decade of your life taken care of, and whether if you screw it up or be the best ever, we got to pay you every nickel of it. I mean, I think there is something to that, there is kind of like, I'm going to wear shorts today. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not really necessarily concerned about what the perception is. So, I think you can get away with that for a minute. And not to say that there's going to be a consequence if you don't and are not successful, but I think Brian Kelly's starting to feel it a little bit. Kind of 3 years on the job. He got down here. He got the money. He got the security. You kind of walk into an LSU gig and you don't really know. Like I've said before, and I believe this, and Will Wade is a friend of mine and somebody who I can talk to, and really gave great insight to me as somebody who talks about LSU sports of, hey, man, you really need to think about what it's like to come into LSU as an outsider, like when you don't know anybody. You don't know a soul. And that happens to a lot of these coaches, that come in where you go find them, you bring them in, they don't know anybody, and they just kind of try to find their way. And, when you get here, everybody loves you. But then you go through the first season of, whatever sport you're coaching, and you don't win every single game, and you find out who's with you, who's against you, and then you start to feel the Louisiana politics start to take shape. I mean, one of the more fascinating things that I have heard, and I've had the privilege of hearing like Jimbo Fisher and some of the people that were on that early staff that we talked about in 2000 talk about Louisiana, LSU, the experience of how it's just different than everywhere else. Florida State, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, all of them. It's just they're all big-time jobs. They're all move-the-meter type spots that can change, your life if you get one of those jobs. LSU is in that class. It's in that discussion, but it's the one that's a little bit different, and it's because of the politics of it that you can't explain, I can't explain. The only way that you really can explain it is just to get in it. And I think, in my opinion, 3 years on the job gives you a really good idea to learn the landscape of what's around you. And I think Kelly won't say it out loud, but I think he feels like, okay, now I got the coaching staff all fixed up. I think, you come down here and you can get away with Brian Polian at Notre Dame. Yep. And I don't mean that disrespectively, but I mean Brian Polian's personality and his position could not handle LSU football. That's not the recruiting coordinator of LSU football. That's not the personality of the recruiting coordinator of LSU football when you're flying to Vegas to recruit DBs. You don't need to do that. You don't know what you're doing. And you can get away with that at Notre Dame, and you can get away with that at other schools. But 10 years, $100 million will not apologize putting the wrong people in place. And that has, in my opinion, kind of churned itself to the top where it's like, hey, you better go hire Bo Davis, bring Corey Raymond back, and spend all the money to bring in Blake Baker, because if you don't, this thing is going to collapse on you real quick.
And that's where I think you see the $100 million come to kind of bear fruit, where it's, okay, I understand that you're paying me all of this money and it's guaranteed, but you saw it happen with Ed Orgeron was guaranteed, $20 million, and he folded in on himself. You saw Brian Kelly kind of realize the bear he was wrestling and go, okay, I can't do this, Polian.
Yeah.
Like, where's Frank?
Absolutely.
And now he's put his staff in place where, like, we've said this consistently, where he posed it as year 3. I look at this as like year 1.5. Now that you have everybody in place, now you can't really – he has the staff that he needs. Like, there's no excuse, because you're going to recruit it the right way. And now it's just a matter of time.
And LSU is building it, in my opinion, in what today's college football world can be successful. Look at the Florida State model. That's just not going to cut it. You can dive into the portal every single year and grab the elite of that portal, that group, and one year you can hit, then next year you can flop. And that's not the way that you run your program. The way that LSU is doing it, in my opinion, is how you sustain. Is you build it through high school recruiting. You go put together, back to back to back, top 5, top 10 classes, bring in elite talent that can create depth, and then you cherry pick the portal. Which, let's be honest, LSU's missed. They've missed. They missed big on the defensive tackle targets this offseason.
But also kind of hit.
But they've also crushed when they hit. I mean, they got the damn Heisman Trophy winner out of the portal. Right? I mean, throw guys like Miles Frazier and, Kyron Lacey in there. And LSU has had some success in the portal. You're not going to hit on
Aaron Anderson,
everybody.
C.J. Daniels, Xavion Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, they've done a really good job. And I think that's the formula of how you sustain to win. And, I watched Georgia and Bama the other night, and to me, quite honestly, LSU doesn't look like that.
Right.
I mean, and do I think LSU is on the horizon of looking like that? I do. I mean, look at the recruiting classes. I love the young players being on the field now. I'm fine with it. And really and truly, I will say this out loud, and obviously it will be a down couple of weeks if this is the case, but you take your lumps with those guys. right? Like, I mean, you got to take the bad to experience the good with some of these young players that are out there. Maybe, a season too early, a half a season too early, 4 games too early. But as far as what's coming in with the recruiting, the coaches that are on the trail recruiting those spots into the future, man, I've got the utmost confidence in LSU there, and I think that they will look like that Alabama-Georgia team that was rolled out on the field a couple of nights ago in a season and a half, But right now, they just look a little different. Those teams look a little different. And you can say that being an LSU fan because for the longest time, LSU is the model of what people looked like, of what they looked at, of what they wanted to blueprint, of what they wanted to copy, of, hey, when we get off the bus, we want to look like LSU. Because those cats just look different.
Herb couldn't stop talking about it in the documentary. When they did the Netflix, and it was like every time he talked about LSU, they were just different. Like, that was a different game. And same thing with Johnny Manziel, where he says he's been scared, twice in his life on a football field, and one time was at LSU. And
I think, from the offensive standpoint, the beautiful part about the program right now is that you are there. From an offensive standpoint, you are as championship ready as any team in the country. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, any of those squads. I would play any of those teams anywhere with LSU's offense. Right, to catch it up defensively and become a whole program where you've got freaks on both sides of the ball. It's just we're still getting there from LSU standpoint. If you're LSU, they're still getting there, and they've got it in place. And I thought that Brian Kelly kind of, that was a great answer from Cobble's question. I mean that was. Like Lloyd said, he doesn't hide. I think that's another positive point for all of us. The $100 million coach with the 10-year contract, he's got security. He ain't got to tell you how he feels. He got to tell you what's on his mind, tell you the truth. And
tell the truth.
That was the answer that that's what I took away from that answer, in the standpoint of. Look, he's just kind of figuring it out too, because like Will Wade pointed out to me a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago, you come into LSU in Louisiana as an outsider and not know anybody, no one, and figure out, like, by yourself on the fly, who do I trust? Whose camp do I want to run with? Which political tie do I want to bind myself to here? Like Wade said, and I think it's a quote that you can use in any regime at any time at LSU. LSU's the only school that would have kept Will Wade when they did, and they're the only school that would have probably fired Will Wade when they did. And if you go back to the ultimate reasoning for both of those time periods, it's political. It's political. It's who he was tied to, who was in power, who was calling the shots. Who was in line for the favors, right? And to kind of learn that on the job probably takes the time period that we've been watching Brian Kelly as the LSU coach. About 2.5 years. 3 years on the job.
And while he's learned that, LSU's had a Heisman-winning quarterback. They beat Alabama in year one, made the SEC championship game, and have back-to-back 10-win seasons. And also have had top 10 classes in the high school recruiting for the last 3 years.
Yeah, so. I mean he's had a lot of high points.
Right.
I mean
he has that, but I do feel like he's getting judged very harshly on this year because of the year 3 comments, where it's like, okay, back to back, like you said, 10-win seasons. Like, what more would you really ask for? Especially, he kind of set the bar almost too high.
Right.
In year 1, where he comes in, you have 40 scholarship players. Loads the entire team out the portal, goes in, beats Alabama year 1, and goes to an SEC championship. And now it's like, well, what's up from there? And I think the fan base kind of was like, go playoff.
I mean, they're ranked 13th in the country right now. The worst place in the world to be in college football in 2024 is number 13, in my opinion. You know what I mean? I'd rather be 25 than 13. And LSU was preseason number 13, and 5 weeks into it, they're still number 13. I mean, they are not quite in it yet, in my opinion. Sure, they could win some games over the next couple of weeks and get into some really good games. Offensively, they have all the firepower that you need. But when you look at the top elite teams, like we said, it just looks a little different. And it may be just a little bit more time than you thought. And like we said, the Cavalry's coming. Recruiting is on its way. You got the guys out on the trail representing LSU that are bringing the players here. It's just kind of